Hi everyone, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, I really appreciate it. Thank you. So to answer this question, as some of you may already know or suspect, the planet to consider is Neptune, which was discovered a number of years after the Uranus discovery, which came in 1781. Neptune is approximately 1843, I think. And it's a planet that is also very, very important in both bringing about the surge in democratic governance, as well as, together with Uranus, being completely intertwined in our lives now and has been for quite some time, especially going back to the 90s, the internet, the explosion of video information writ large. And this is where you start to see the problem as well, because in astrology, everything functions in ranges, meaning any planet, any sign has a high end and a low end. And unfortunately, you get both. There are really honest people in the world and there are thieves. We simply have to get used to it. We have to live with it. While, of course, we work toward a better world, so that eventually we have more honest people than thieves, basically, to put it bluntly. But this is Neptune. Neptune is, on the high end, the most spiritual energy. And in part it's because it's very open-ended. It has a kind of anything goes quality. And it's the notion that when you're in your deepest states, what feels like the source is this incredibly open-ended sense of peace, being the truth of things, the source of things. But then as it descends into manifestation, it can be that, and it can be all kinds of very positive things on the downward spiral, so to speak. But as it descends and descends and descends, you start to get lying and deception and gaslighting, and until you're right at the bottom of the barrel, which is what our current president does and operates from. That's the bottom line. And so then if you say, well, we're in this period which is filled, well, first of all, with people that are liars, that are scoundrels, that lie constantly. And if you go back some years, there was some of it, but not at this level. This is just exploded, not into infinity, but close to it. And here's where I would correlate it to Neptune entering Pisces in 2011, where it has been all these years and still is. Neptune has one last bit to go in the very late degrees of Pisces, after which it'll go into Aries, where it'll be for 12 to 13 years, till 2038. I can remember something changing in the 2011 range when Neptune entered Pisces, because I've watched the politics in this country pretty intently since the turn of the century. So I was totally attuned during the Bush years and then the early part of the Obama years. In 2011, what I began to notice was, post that Tea Party explosion, just blatant lying. One of the architects, person that I totally detest because of how, he's basically one of these liars, even though he's intelligent. Ted Cruz, we know what he's like. And I remember that in 2011 there was an instance where they literally brought about the close of the government. We're back there again in a sense, but that was one of their many closures. And he was just saying on TV, no, we didn't close it, the Democrats closed it. It was just like flipping it on his head, telling you the exact opposite of what was happening. And I was totally outraged, and I thought, okay, this is beyond lying. This is just ridiculous. But it's, kept growing and growing. And then we get to 2016 and we get Trump, and that's accelerated even more, to the point that now feels like it's everyone in government, because everyone in government is subservient to him. And so people that you normally wouldn't expect to be outright liars, like Speaker Johnson, who purports to be a Christian and purports to be, holier than thou, you would expect that he'd probably be a little straighter, but he's not. He just goes along with the party line, so everybody's lying. So bottom line, I would say for this to abate, we need Neptune to change signs. And when you think about the historical record, Neptune was last in Pisces during, in fact, the period when it was discovered into the 1850s. I believe it was in Aquarius when it was discovered, but then it went into Pisces. And that whole lead up to the Civil War was the disinformation and the lying that they were doing, to try to keep the slavery intact, even though they're constantly trying to tell you that that really wasn't it. It was some other reason. That was exactly the reason. But then the war period starts in 1861, precisely on cue with Neptune entering Aries, which in the modern era now is June of this year. Neptune entering Aries, even though it's going back a little bit into Pisces, effectively it's in Aries already. Although if you want to be more precise, you'd say next spring it goes into Aries for good till 2038. So my sense is that just like then, it went from disinformation into action, into you actually litigate the conflict. And yes, some of it remains because things very seldom overnight switch from one thing to another. So we will still deal with it for some time in the upcoming years, even though Neptune will be in Aries. In fact, one of the reasons is that the American chart has early Cancer planets, so Neptune is still squaring into there, which means some of the remnants will continue. But I strongly suspect that as we move into the later years of this decade, and even very soon, meaning like by next year, we can start to see some of the problems with lying and some of the pushback. And in other words, it's going to start to get eroded. It won't be as simple and as easy as it has been during these years, because it has been incredibly damaging to the country, incredibly frustrating to everyone as a result as well. And to remember that Neptune isn't just that. That's the low end. The high end of Neptune is that also starting in 2011, correlates with the incredible explosion in spiritual information that now is accessible online. I often say to people that when I got into this in the 1980 period, if I wanted to find information on anything, I had to go to a small occult shop somewhere, if it would even be available, and then work through it and so forth. Now everything is there. If you research via video, via AI, via images, via text, you name it, maybe not all, but pretty close to all. So there's a lot of information available, which I think is good. It's good for the world. Those who can hear, those who can tune in to the high end of the planet, it's remarkably helpful. The ones that don't aren't going to get the advantage or the benefit. And then the ones that are playing the low end, not only is it bad for them in the near term, it's bad in the longer term, because then you incur, what people call karma, which is that, things will eventually turn on you as a result. So that's the answer to the question that I posed in the title of the video.